Hello, everyone. Welcome to School After Hours podcast, where we talk about all things related to out of school time programming and education. I am your host, Jay Lee, and we are in full planning mode for the summertime. Yes, summer is almost here, so it's time to wrap up the school activities and get prepared for some summer fun. With that being said, I thought it would be a good idea to share with you a valuable resource that you can use for some of your physical fitness activities during the summer. That's why I have CEO of Power Up Fitness, Stacy Baugues, with us. So, what is Power Up Fitness? I'm sure some of you are asking. Power Up Fitness is a program provider that is focused in physical activity, but also incorporates academic learning, social emotional learning, as well as character development. Now, how do you put all those things together? I have no idea, but that's why we have Stacy here, because she's going to go ahead and give us the rundown of how she came up with this concept. In our conversation, you'll hear Stacy talk about her journey into out of school time programming, but also she'll share with us how she came up with the concept for Power Up Fitness. In addition to that, we'll go ahead and share some games that's actually in her curriculum, but also what she has expanded in the program to adapt to the needs of what's going on now in after school time programming and what she looks forward to doing with Power Up in the future. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and start the interview by getting into our Community Corner. Community Corner is a segment of the show that allows guests or myself to share tips, advice, or information on a specific topic with young people, families, or community members. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our Community Corner conversation. So, we're going to go ahead and get into our Community Corner, and my Community Corner question for you is, what are some ways providers can incorporate fitness into their weekly routine when it comes to education?
Great question, and kind of three quick tips that I think are a great way to do this. So first is transition times. So thinking about as students are going from SNAP to tutor time or tutor time to enrichment, what can we be doing in those 3 to 5 minutes to kind of get kids refocused and ready to move on to the next activity? Alphabet stretch is one of my favorites. So you're just standing up, you're shaping the letters with your body, a capital A, B, C, so on and so forth. You could spell out a friend's names, partner up. It's a quick 3 to 5 minute activity, get you ready to move on to the next thing. The second is refocusing routines. There are exercises that are midline crossing activities, meaning the right side of my body, my arm or my leg, is crossing over my heart to the left side of my body. These midline crossing activities are proven to help with brain development. They're firing off neurons that are helping with problem solving, skills that help you focus. And so whether it's just kind of moving your arms back and forth, side to side, crossing over your body, or kind of marching in place with your leg touching your opposite elbow to knee, these are going to help students kind of get focused and get ready as they sit down to maybe that tutor or homework help time, right? So midline crossing activities. And then enrichment time, right? So programs like Power Up Your School or other kind of structured programs that are out there, adding those to your enrichment time. So, maybe they have the opportunity to choose from robotics or Power Up Your School or gardening club or basketball kind of sport focused activities. Adding that physical activity to your enrichment time is a great way to ensure that you're going to make it happen.
Thank you, Stacy, for sharing that information. Now let's go ahead and start our interview. So once again, hi, Stacy. How are you?
Hello. Good to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. So I've been thinking about this conversation, and I just want everyone to know a little bit about you, in case they don't have background information. Go ahead and tell us about you and how you got started in after school time programming.
Yeah, so excited to share this. I think I have maybe an unconventional path into the after school, out of school time world, but maybe everybody in after school kind of feels like that, right? Does after school find us or do we find after school? Really is the question, right? So I was working on my master's degree in pediatric exercise physiology. Say that 3 times fast. I sure can't. Now, as part of that degree, I knew that I wanted to be working with youth, but I didn't want to work in a clinical setting, right? So a lot of people in that education path tend to go towards pediatric physical therapy, those kinds of things. And I wasn't really interested in that. I really liked kind of the research, the education aspect of it. So after finishing my degree and some volunteer experiences that I'll hopefully have a chance to share with you in a little bit, I found myself working as a health educator for a local school system. And we were finding ways to incorporate both nutrition education and more physical activity within our school day. But with the rigors of, as I'm sure everybody here can relate to, the rigors of, intensive reading time and test taking time and just all the things that are jam packed into the traditional school day, we were really having a hard time finding an avenue to add that health education component. So we saw after school as a wonderful opportunity to provide resources for our out of school time programming going on in this kind of medium sized school system in Tennessee. And I just so happened to share the office with our federal grant writer. So it made sense to partner up to achieve the goals that my office, the Office of Coordinated School Health, was working towards, but also her programming across the 7 after school sites that she was running. So that was my really first introduction into after school. And so I was going in and out of the different before and after school sites, doing nutrition education, physical activity programming. And, although my career ended up changing and it took me down a different path, I guess, a little bit further from after school for just a little bit. I ended up working in a kind of community health capacity, working to build partnerships with local governments, school systems, organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, to still have that health focus. So I'd say that's always been a big part, seeing the incredible impact and role that after school plays in our community in any role that I've been a part of. So transition all of that to Power Up. Part of what I wanted to make sure I was doing as leader of this organization was really focusing on the needs of after school, and the alignment really just made sense. So that's where we put all of our efforts.
Nice, nice. And in focusing your efforts into putting more time into after school programming, how did you begin to tie education into like your fitness component?
Yeah, so great question. So this is kind of what I was hoping I could lead you into with my experience in grad school. So again, pediatric exercise physiology, say it 3 times fast. Of course, as many grad students are, they may be working on research projects while also trying to look for volunteer opportunities or part-time job opportunities, right? And I found a volunteer opportunity to lead morning fitness, just general fitness, not that education component quite yet, at a local school. So I would get up at 6 a.m. every morning and go be a part of their before school program from, I think it was from 6:45 to 7:45 when the bell would ring. They also offered after school. So it was just an extended learning program here and offer fitness in the morning. And so as I was walking into that space each day, I realized it was kind of a community space in between some different classrooms. And it was a really small space. We had to get creative with how we did the activities. We had to get creative with keeping students safe in a small space, right? If you can picture a bunch of second and third graders running around playing games, there were probably 80 of them in this very small room, common area. You had to get really creative with a lot of things. So one day I was walking in and we were walking past classrooms and I saw spelling words on one of the teacher's doors and just thought, why aren't we let's add some spelling words to their jumping jacks today? If you think about it, some of the very first songs and things that we learn, the alphabet, right? It has a rhythm to it. And the reason really young children are able to remember it is because of that rhythm. So I thought, surely if we can connect their spelling words to jumping jacks, that has an innate rhythm to it, it'll better, kind of help the students recall their spelling words. And that's really when the light bulb went off. This could really be something, a program for extended learning. Here I was volunteering in extended learning that not only helps get students more active, but they can also help improve their academic outcomes all at the same time. And if we do it right in a way that doesn't even feel like they're learning, right? It's going to be so much fun that they're not even realizing that academic component to it. So that was really kind of the light bulb moment. From there, I ended up speaking with several educators, mentors, OST professionals, and really kind of went on a listening tour, if you will, and was getting the input. What kind of programming needs do they have? How do staff get trained? What kind of trends are going on in the extended learning world, right? And so took all of their input, saw the need and heard the need for standards aligned programming that felt different than the school day. That was kind of the key phrase that came out of it. Standards aligned programming that felt different than the school day, right? So we wanted to kind of make it feel different than PE, different than recess, different than classroom experiences too, but still integrate those math and English language arts academics. So that's That's really when Power Up Your School was born. I worked on writing that initial curriculum. Then the very next year, where I had been volunteering as a grad student, we actually were able to launch the first Power Up Your School program. It was a lot of fun. I met this sweet girl, Yulissa. I've got to tell this story. So, still in that same very crowded common space, there was this one young little girl that was kind of always getting in the back of the line, seemed very shy. English was her second language, so I think there was certainly some language barrier and, shyness around that, lack of confidence around that. And I kind of would notice her each day and try to find ways to encourage her to get involved. But again, this is a room full of 60 students, and there was one me leading this program. And so, did my best to make sure everybody was getting the attention they deserved. But she always stood out in my mind. So the semester goes along, and I start to see her getting a little bit more involved in the activities, starting to kind of find a little friend group, and was feeling really encouraged by that. But really, the part that was just still gives me chills thinking about it. I wish everybody could see. I have chills on my arms right now. Is around holiday break, her classroom teacher came up to me and she's like, "Stacy, I am so excited to share with you." She's like, "Yulissa wasn't playing with many friends on the playground. She didn't really feel like she had a great way to communicate with them. Her teacher found out that Yulissa had spent her very small allowance that she had been saving up to go buy a jump rope from the Dollar Tree. And she was bringing that jump rope to recess and now was connecting with those same friends that she'd been physically active with in Power Up in the morning through jump roping at recess." And so it was just so powerful to see that impact of not only, great, we can incorporate this academic component into our physical activity, but look at the social emotional piece too that creates this community. And I think after school does that through a lot of programming, not just programs like Power Up, but really that sense of community. And so if there was that light bulb moment, like I said, with the jumping jacks, then Yulissa is like the motivation behind once that light bulb went off. Yulissa is the reason that I come to work every day, and there are thousands of Ulyssas out there, I know. So that's really kind of where the concept came from and the inspiration really came from.
Nice, nice. And with creating your curriculum and being able to go back to your school or your area that you first started at and generated some of these ideas to kind of test it in that specific
Mhm.
area. Once everything was kind of rolling and the administration noted that, hey, like she might be onto
Mhm.
something, how did you begin to push forward to be like, okay, maybe can we do this continuously for each year?
Yeah, great question. So one of the really key things I think we ended up doing was bringing in, at the time, the University of Tennessee's kinesiology department to do an independent evaluation of the program. They brought in a team of researchers to evaluate a couple of different things. The first being, how engaged were the instructors with the participants? So this was once I had already started training some other instructors. It wasn't just me. That would have been too biased of an evaluation, right? We needed to see how existing extended learning staff could carry out the program. So the researchers took a look at how well the staff members had been trained in terms of how were they implementing the program, were they doing effective, following the lesson plans effectively, carrying out the exercises and curriculum effectively. And then they also looked at how active the students were. So there's kind of a key activity intensity, if you will, moderate to vigorous physical activity. It's an intensity. It's a level of activity. So it's a little bit more than a walk, but not quite a full sprint. It's that zone where you kind of got a little bit of a sweat going, but you're not totally out of breath. You could still kind of talk to somebody, but maybe you're starting to huff and puff a little bit. That's moderate to vigorous physical activity. Why that's so important is that zone, research has shown, is linked to higher academic outcomes. So we really wanted these researchers to see if we were getting students into that moderate to vigorous physical activity zone as a part of the Power for School program. And great news, they were. We were able to verify that. And then the third thing, the very last thing that these researchers did was they surveyed the teachers. So they surveyed classroom teachers, different than the instructors who were leading the program. We wanted to know what kind of carryover is happening in the classroom, whether you do Power Up before school or after school, summer programming, is that having a positive academic outcome? And we heard really, really great things. So teachers reported that students were more engaged in classroom discussion. They were more focused. They were having fewer behavior problems. And that was just after one single Power Up session. Over the course of a semester of Power Up, Students were having more self-confidence. They were performing better academically. And one that really stood out to me is that students were even going to the nurse less often, and thought that was really neat. Not only from a physical health perspective, but I think a mental health perspective too, as we know that asking to go see the nurse can mean a lot more than just a tummy ache or a fever. So I think that was a really neat outcome as well. So how did we keep it going? We got this research team to come in and evaluate to kind of prove the things that we felt like the program had, but to make sure we could independently verify that. And then that really gave us the umph, if you will, to start bringing it to other schools. Begin expanding locally in the East Tennessee region through some partnerships with coordinated school health, and was doing some in-person training as a part of that, going out to the different school systems, training their before and after school extended learning staff to begin carrying out the program, provided them with the lesson plans and curriculum, instructor manuals on top of that training. And that's really how it began growing. Then the pandemic hit, and a lot changed really quickly.
Oh, I'm happy you brought that up. So how does that feel? Like in the process of, I am on to something like this can be it. And you go ahead and you start expanding, you start reaching out to people, you have some partners that's willing to try it. And then COVID-19 happens. So how did you have to begin to pivot to still incorporate this into after school learning and education?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's just like a whew moment, right? So the irony is that in 2019, after we had done all the research and started kind of having that really nice local and regional growth, I thought, okay, got a small team right now, and traveling across the country on a regular basis to provide these trainings is going to be really challenging. So in the fall of 2019, we actually launched our online instructor training platform so that the training that we were going out and doing in person could now be done for after school staff at their own pace, on demand, on our online platform. We'd ship out the materials to them, then they do the training, then they are ready to carry out the program confidently and successfully at their sites. And that was going to give us some real scalability. So we launched that in 2019. I think it was about September 2019. And as we all know, March hits. And so get this, I was gearing up to go to my very first ever NAA conference for March of 2020. And, feeling excited. We've got a vendor booth. We've planned out which sessions we want to attend. We're just really excited to engage with all of the other OST professionals that were going to be heading to NAA. I think it was going to be in Washington, D.C. that year.
Yeah, I was applying. I was like, you're right up the block. I could do it.
Yep. It was drivable for us from East Tennessee. It's going to be about an 8-hour drive, right? And then get that email that it had been canceled or that they were shifting to virtual, and just felt like, no, this was going to be, here we go. We've launched the platform. We're ready to grow, and expand across the country, not just here regionally. And then that happened. And so at first it felt crushing, as I'm sure most people felt, right? But then after about a week or two, take a step back and say, okay, what can we do now? Where do we go from here? So from there, ended up quickly creating some just on-demand Power Up Your School videos that could be click and play, 20 to 30-minute Power Up Your School classes. So everything from our warm-up activities that incorporate both math and ELA, to our games and strength and endurance exercises that still get them into that moderate to vigorous zone, but all kind of like watching it on their computers or on TV or broadcast onto a projector. So much like you and I could go turn on a Peloton class. I feel like most people know what Peloton is, right? And I don't have one, but turn on the class and do it on demand with that instructor. That's what we created in response to the pandemic. What we learned pretty quickly from that is it was a great temporary solution, but of course, as some states were starting to slowly open up or offer virtual or hybrid programming, whether it was, during the school day or before and after school, I think really most of the before and after school sites expanded learning programs stayed open in some way, shape, or form. Even I feel like when schools were still shut down, we hear some incredible stories about Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs who stepped in and filled the need of our emergency personnel who still needed to go to work every single day, but needed an option for their children. And so we worked really hard to partner with those groups to adapt all of our exercises and games in a way that you and I could do right here virtually, through a Zoom or something like that together, or we could do it safely, distance from one another if we were in person and in programming that continued on. So we provided those resources to all of our partner sites that had onboarded with us, pre-pandemic, and then anybody who was still looking for those options through the pandemic. And I think one thing that, I like to share a lot is PowerUp is completely equipment free. So you don't need to be getting out hula hoops or dodgeballs or anything like that. So I think it really lends itself to that kind of virtual hybrid or kind of safe distancing programming, maybe easier than some others. It certainly was something we had to get creative with, but then we still share all those adaptations and are proud of that because now PowerUp can virtually be implemented any space, any place. And really, whether those days and after school where you feel like you get to start in the gymnasium and maybe you have access to the PE equipment closet, great. But then you move to the cafeteria because some sports team practice came into the gym. Oh, but there's a meeting in the cafeteria. Now you've got to go to the library or a classroom or a small hallway or community space or outside even. And so we would never want that to interrupt their ability to carry out PowerUp. And so I think the pandemic really helped validate that for us, if you will.
Right. So for any and every situation, just about, you can still use PowerUp to engage your children physically, but also academically at the same time.
Absolutely. I'll share one of my favorite games, Alphabet Relay. So I've already shared Alphabet Stretch. We'll stick with this ELA theme here. Relay. So picture students divided up into teams, maybe 4 or 5 students on each team. And the first student's on each team is gonna run across the space, shout out a word that starts with the letter A, and then run back. And the next student on my team is gonna run, shout out a word that starts with the letter B, and then run back. C, D, so on and so forth. Now, this particular game for younger kiddos, you just leave it at the letters, not coming up the words. There's enough communication and coordination that goes into getting from A to Z as a team. But then you scale that up for different grades. So maybe 4th and 5th grade students, we're putting a category on it. So now they've got to name fruits and vegetables, A through Z, if we've just done a nutrition lesson or a gardening lesson or something, right? That same relay game, we picture relay races as taking place, in a gym or outside. That same relay race, we can adapt. So when it's my turn on my team, I do 3 jumping jacks. Then I shout out apple for my fruit that starts with the letter A. And then you could go and you do your 3 jumping jacks and shout out B, banana, right? And so our team can still do this relay race here virtually together. Or if we were in a small space in a classroom, right? Our jumping jacks take up little amount of space, but still get that academic influence and the physical activity part of it.
Nice, nice. So this is a good moment for us to take a break. Everybody go ahead, get some water, get a snack. Don't go too far. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. We're going to pay these bills and get back to this conversation. See you in a few. Welcome back. So we have Miss Stacy here from Power of Fitness, and she's been sharing her experience with us about her program and how education has been tied into fitness and sharing some tips with us, but also how she's had to adapt her program from the pandemic. But also we are going to move into how she has revived or adjusted some things to accommodate programs in schools coming out of the pandemic. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that portion of our conversation. So Stacy, we've all gone through the bug of adjustment of the pandemic, and you were sharing in your story how some adjustments had to be made, how you've been able to still interact with everybody because of this virtual option that you created. But as we are coming out of the pandemic, how do you feel that you've had to adjust some parts of your program to deal with this new environment that we are experiencing right now?
Absolutely. Well, so a couple things come to mind as this kind of post-pandemic or emergent post-pandemic phase of life, right? Is one, how are we still growing our program and working with, our partners who are on board pre, during, and now post-pandemic, along with onboarding new partners? Then also, what have we done to our program to really still, make sure that we're relevant and needed in this environment? So kind of from that program growth standpoint, first, I think conference engagement has been key for us. And, on one side of things, the shift to virtual conferences was a blessing in disguise in that it allowed our very small team to be at almost every single state after school conference in the, kind of first year when they were all virtual, as opposed to having to travel across the country week after week to those conferences. So I think it really gave us a lot of opportunity to connect. It gave us the opportunity to provide free professional development as a part of those conferences. We were volunteering our time, sharing, one of the big presentations that we gave was physical activity aligned with academics. And we shared more than 20 different activities and games, kind of like the alphabet relay game that I've been sharing with you today for OST professionals at each of their state network conferences. So we continue to do that. Now a handful of them are in person, a handful of those are still virtual. So just looking at some different ways that we can continue engaging, providing that real value added opportunity, whether or not they choose to use Power Up, but still being kind of a part of this professional development world and providing those resources that we hope after school professionals are wanting and craving to provide for their participants. So still doing quite a bit of that and open to the best ways to connect with OST professionals, knowing that now that we are back to a lot of in-person conferences, are all staff members getting to go to the conferences? Is it just program directors who bring the information back? And so making sure we provide those program directors attending conferences with resources and information they can bring back to staff, right, post-conference. But then also, how do we still engage with the staff members who may not have been able to kind of make the trip to state capitol for the conference? So we are doing that through resources on our website. We have free monthly tips and tricks, and these are published every single month. They have games, exercises, activities. All of them have a math or an ELA alignment. They are really great resource to print out and use for family engagement as well. And so they're colorful, they're easy for families to kind of grab onto and say, oh yeah, I understand how to do this activity. I can do it right here in my living room. So through that conference connection, but also the resources that we continue to provide absolutely free. So they've got options, whether or not they can be at those in-person conferences and events. So from kind of that conference engagement, what have we also been doing for our program? So I think anybody working with youth through this kind of crazy time frame of the pandemic and now post-pandemic really saw the social and emotional toll that it took on students and kids through this time period, right? And the kids were craving those in-person connections. And so one of my favorite additions that we made to the program kind of through the pandemic in preparation for this post-pandemic wave is that we've added a component called character concepts. So now with every single Power Up lesson, there's a character concept there. It's a simple prompt for the staff members to ask students a question related to the game that they played that day as a part of the Power Up lesson. So for example, the alphabet relay game that I've been sharing, afterwards, we might prompt staff to say, okay, now how did you all need to communicate in order to be successful as a team? So teamwork is that character concept. Communication could be that character concept, or overcoming barriers. What would your team do differently next time? Let's play round two. What is your team going to do different to be more successful this second round? So very simple prompts that get students thinking, but they realize, oh, I needed to work as a team in order to be successful at this game. It didn't matter if I could run fast or say my letter or come up with a word. If my teammates couldn't do that, our team was slowed down, right? And so it's really neat to see the students step up as leaders and really identify the things that their team can be doing or how they can communicate better. And so I think adding those character concepts to our lessons have really been a really positive outcome of the pandemic and hopefully supporting after school professionals in kind of easy ways to start up some of these more challenging conversations on many occasions. So that's been a big piece of adaptations post-pandemic things that we've been doing. I think the other thing that we saw is that staff turnover was probably higher than ever before across all industries, but certainly in the OST space. And so you've heard me mention the online training that now, is accessible for staff across the country. What happens when a staff member turns over and now we need a new staff member to be leading Power Up? What happens? How do I log in? How do I get to the training? All those questions. we offer complimentary staff turnover and substitution. So if you said, okay, we're going to identify Alicia, she's one of my team members, as the next Power Up instructor, you simply let us know. We get them plugged in and connected to that online training, and they're going to be ready to rumble with the programming within, a day if they'd like. So we really wanted to help support programs that we're seeing higher staff turnover and saying, we want to help you. We don't want that to be a barrier to your ability to implement Power Up. Let's get those new team members connected to the training. They can do it at a time and a place that's comfortable for them because it's an on-demand training. As long as you still got those hard copy lesson plans, then they're going to be ready to rumble as soon as they've done the training. So really, I think supporting some of those challenges that we saw from a staffing perspective and the out of school time space was another, I think, major adaptation that we made as a part of the pandemic.
I think that is great, especially when you bring up that social emotional learning and having that conversation about character. So you have them identify certain things that can help them, like you said, work on communication, work on teamwork, work on being self-aware, but also socially aware. All of those things play a part in actual real time in life that they can actually, do not just in that activity, but they could think about it and relate to, okay, if this was a different situation, like I learned in Power Up, I can apply this or what I learned there here in this situation. I think that is great.
You nailed it. That's our goal, is whether it's the academics or the social emotional piece, it's oh yeah, I've done this. I've done perimeter and area in the geometry jumps game. Oh, but I had to work with a partner and find similarities and differences in our answers. And now, not only am I feeling better at my calculating perimeter and area, but also I know how to work with somebody new that I might not have worked with before. That's what we want. We want to see that carryover and those real life connections. And again, in a way that students don't even realize that they're learning or that they're having these experiences.
I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
We love what we do. We have a lot of fun doing it. We would invite anybody into the fun anytime.
It sounds like it. So my last question for you is, starting on this journey, getting things up and running, then hit with the pandemic, and then now coming out of it, where do you want to see Power Up in the next 2 to 3 years?
Ooh, great question. So we obviously want to continue growing. That's the goal. We want to connect with more site partners. We want to continue to be this resource provider. We'll be at the Needham Lowry Summer Symposium here in July. We're headed out to a couple of different states out west throughout the rest of the year, connecting with their 21st century funded sites and just kind of being this resource and curriculum provider. But also, we're ready to expand our programming. So we are kind of in the process of launching Power Up Peanuts. It is a pre-K version of the Power Up Your School program. So, where you've got alphabet relay for older students, think about games like Color Pop and Syllable Stomp and things like that for the pre-K students. So lots of fun, knowing that a lot of systems, whether it's school systems or YMCA type organizations, do reach an early learning population. We're ready to serve that population too. So kind of really excited to expand our programming to reach those youngest learners, the littlest learners, if you will, knowing that if we can help encourage that one, joyful movement. So connecting just this joyous fun as it relates to physical activity, but also those really early learning literacy skills and math skills in a way that is like fun counting games or fun syllable games, right? We get to stomp our feet and practice syllables. What a fun way to learn, right? So certainly connecting with more sites with Power for School, but also the expansion of the Power Up Peanuts program we're really excited about moving forward.
I'm excited for you. It sounds like it's going to be a great time. Next thing you know, the U.S. will not be the only stop. You'll be somewhere across seas.
That'd be lots of fun. We welcome wherever we can be a resource. We're ready to go.
I know that's right. Well, this is a good time for us to go ahead and transition into our Professionals Lounge.
Professionals Lounge is a segment of the show that allows guests to share advice with other practitioners in the OST and youth development field about how they can begin growing their gifts and talents, but also develop themselves as professionals in the field. Here's our Professionals Lounge conversation.
All right, Stacey. So this is usually our area where we have guests on the show give a tip or some advice to professionals that are in this space and how they can move their career forwards, or some life experience that if you could do over, this is what you would do a little bit better, or this is what I would have kept doing regardless. So my question in that sense for Professionals Lounge is, what are 3 tips you would give any community member that may want to start up an after school program like you have or be a program provider?
Yeah, so great question. And a couple of things come to mind. So, first is looking at if they're looking to be a program provider like we are. So, where's my area of expertise? Am I a fitness professional? Am I a rock climbing professional? Am I a gardening professional? And so kind of thinking about or passionate, right? You don't have to be a gardening professional, but am I passionate about gardening? Am I knowledgeable? Do I have this skill set that is unique, as it relates to gardening? I'm going to use that example. So first kind of recognizing where's my unique skill set. And then next is how can I best serve the after school population with my skill set? So is that creating a curriculum like what we did, or is that going out and, hands-on learning, so working with students directly, leading gardening with your local after-school programs or community organizations. So finding your own skill set, finding kind of that value that you can bring to the table. I think next is looking at what community partners are around the table that can help propel you to grow that gardening program. So I think a lot about the resources that I've leaned upon, and one is our local entrepreneurship center. So here in Knoxville, Tennessee, we have the Knoxville Entrepreneurship Center, and they have been integral in helping with for-profits and nonprofits get off the ground once you've got an idea. It is a totally free resource. Most mid-sized cities have an entrepreneurial center. They have all kinds of classes and resources. Again, you don't have to be starting a for-profit company. This is for nonprofit organizations too, help you figure out what you need to do in terms of kind of licensure and liability and the things that aren't as fun to think about, right? As going out and getting that gardening or fitness program started. I think that's what really brings the experience, right? I didn't have experience as an entrepreneur. I had experience in pediatric exercise physiology and experience in the education world. But the business side of things is where I recognized where I needed support. So finding community partners that I could lean on to kind of make up my areas of weakness, right? And then I think finding the professional resources. So whether that is professional from a sense of how do I find the after school professional world, right? That's NAA, that's Boost, that's the Anita and Lowry Summer Symposium, looking at those organizations, but also how do those organizations distribute their resources? So thinking about why for why, for example, when an incredible online platform for after school professionals, free resources from the US Department of Education, right? And so looking at the dissemination of resources and how can Power Up or kind of whatever they're looking to launch be a part of those resources. We are soon partnering with Mizzen and going to have Power Up activities on the Mizzen by Mott platform. And so I think, again, that kind of resource dissemination being that third component for getting a programming started.
Nice. All good tips. All good tips. I completely support looking into your local resources that are free because, as you said, as you go into being a program provider, there's this entrepreneur piece that you really have to look at. And if you're not careful, it can kind of bury you because it can be overwhelming at times. So definitely look into your communities, definitely look into other resources that are available to you, and then ask around, like you said, because you never know who the person next to you might know who to connect you with, or they are the person to connect with. So
Absolutely.
ask around, ask around. So thank you, Stacy, so much for taking this time with us. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. Is there any way or is there anything that you want to share with the audience, anything that you may have coming up, and how can they connect with you if they want to look for you on social media?
Awesome. Thank you so, so much. It's been a pleasure to be here. And yes, I would love to connect. If any of the resources that I've shared sounds like they could be valuable to any of the listeners out there, check us out at powerupfitness.net. Those tips and tricks that I mentioned are there. The activities and games are available, as well as all of our different kind of comprehensive bundles that are available too. But even if you're just looking for the free resources, we encourage you to hop on over, and we've got plenty and they come every month, right? Again, we want to be that professional resource provider, whether it's our tips and tricks or our program bundles. And so powerupfitness.net, check us out. We'd love to connect. Our team is pretty much always available and listening, and we really want to give you the resources that are unique to you and your site.
If you enjoyed this episode and feel you received some good information, give us a review on Apple Podcasts or visit the Podchaser website and leave us a comment. This will help us get feedback on the show and collect testimonials for our personal website. Share us with your friends, share us with your family, share us with your network. Help us spread the word about how out of school time programming is impacting our youth as well as our communities. We can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. Well, that's all I have for today. In the words of Mr. Arthur Ashe, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Until next time, bye-bye.